Alright guys, in this lecture I want to talk about while loop. The loop that will continue going while a particular condition is true. Real life example for while loop can be a car with full tank of fuel. So while the fuel tank is not empty, car will work. Otherwise it will not go because the fuel tank is empty. So let's compare this against the for loop that we have seen before. So we have two kinds of for loops. The first one is where we are looping through the list of items and do something with each item in this list over here. And the other one is using range function where we create a range between A and B and we use number in that range to do something. So in this case, we are just printing out this number to the console. The while loop looks like this. And in this case, while a particular condition is true, then we go inside the loop and we do something repeatedly. And it's only when the something becomes false then the loop stops. So let's look at what the code look like in real life example. So here I have hurdle 1 challenge that you did previously, and for this we created for loop in order to get our robot to jump over these hurdles 6 times to get the final destination. Now we could also do the same thing by using while loop, and this is how we will do it. So here the first thing that we are going to do, we are going to create a variable in which we are going to save the number of hurdles. So number of hurdles. So we know that if we count the number of hurdles, we have 6 number of hurdles. So I'm going to assign 6 to this hurdles, number of hurdles variable. And then we use a while loop to loop through these hurdles until the number of hurdles reach 0. So this means that I'm just going to delete this for loop from here, and I'm going to write our while loop like this. So it's going to be like this: while number of hurdles is greater than 0. In this case, we are going to call jump function inside this while loop. Then this means that we are doing something inside this loop. Well, in this case, what we need to do is to perform jump function. Now after jump, before going back to this while loop over here, we have to decrease the number of hurdles. So number of hurdles will be decreased by 1 in each step. So I'm going to put minus equal sign and 1. And in order to better visualize what's happening here, I'm also going to add a print statement to print the variable to the console after making it minus 1. So I'm just going to put print statement over here, number of hurdles. Then let's go and step through this one. So first we are defining the number of hurdles, then we are continuing to the number of hurdles loop. So while the number of hurdles is greater than 0, we are continuing there. So then it continues to the jump function, so it's going to jump over the hurdle. Then after reaching it, it will continue to do this part. After finishing jump function, as you can see, it's jumped from the first hurdle over here, it continues to the number of hurdles. So it's going to decrease the number of hurdles, then it's going to print out number of hurdles to the console. So as you can see, it's printing out over here. So I'm just going to put it over here to see it very clearly. So in this case, the number of hurdles become 5. First it was 6. From the first loop, it becomes 5. So this means that we have 5 hurdles left over here. Now if I continue to click on this one more time and reach to the number of hurdles and minus 1, in this case you will see that in the next step it's 4. And if I continue one more time to jump, when we reach the number of hurdles, it's going to be 3. Then it continues like this, and when we reach the next one, it's going to be 2. Then one more time, when we continue this, it's going to be 1. Then one more time, it's going to jump. So in this case, you will see that number of hurdles will become 0. So after reaching 0, it stops over here, because in this case, the loop stops over here because number of hurdles is not anymore greater than 0. So this part of code becomes false. So the loop stops over here. So our robot reaches to the final destination. Now, as you can see, this loop continues until the number of hurdles reach to the 0. So when the number of hurdles reach to 0, this, as I mentioned, this condition becomes false. So we exit out of loop and we end our program over here. Now this is how while loop works in real life example. Now the syntax for the while loop looks like this. First we have while keyword over here. Then we have some sort of condition that we are going to test. So previously we saw that it was number of the hurdles being greater than 0, and whenever this condition is true, then it's going to look inside the while loop at indented level Now we are performing these instructions inside while loop over and over again, and finally when it gets the end of the while loop, it becomes back to the beginning and tests this condition again. And if this is still true, if this condition is still true, then it's going to go through and loop until this condition becomes false, at which point it ends and exits the while loop. You can also read the while statement as if it were English. It means while the number of hurdles is greater than 0, jump, then reduce the number of hurdles by 1, and finally display the values of hurdles. So as you can see, we can read it as it were in English. More formally, here's the flow of execution for a while statement. First, we are evaluating the condition, yielding true or false. Then if the condition is false, we are exiting the while statement and continue to execution of the next statement. If the condition is true, we are executing the body that we have inside while loop. Here you need to take into account that the body of loop should change the value of one or more variables so that eventually the condition becomes false and loop terminates. If there is no iteration variable, the loop will repeat forever and resulting in an infinite loop. And one of the things you might be wondering right now is that we have learned about for loop and we have learned about while loop. And if I can use both of them, why will I choose one over another? When would I use a for loop and when would I use a while loop? What I will tend to say is that for loops are really great when you iterate over something and when you do something with each thing that you are iterating over. For example, if you are iterating through a list, you are saying for each item in our list of items, we can do anything with these items over here. For instance, it can be just simply print out items to the console. But here the same thing cannot be done very easily using while loop. Now similarly, we can use range function inside for loop. For range from A to B, we can print all numbers to the console over here. Now you want to be using a while loop when you don't really care what number in a sequence you are in and which item you are iterating through in a list, and you just simply want to carry out some sort of functionality many times until some sort of condition that you set. And this is also a good point to mention that while loops are a little bit more dangerous than the for loops, because in for loops you are setting ahead of time how many times something is going to run. It's going to stop once it's reached the end of list of the items in this case. But for while loop, it will continue running until this particular condition that we set over here becomes false. If you have some sort of condition that actually never becomes false, well, your while loop becomes something that is known as infinite loop. Now let's say we have a while loop tested while 4 is greater than 2, then we are doing this, then we do this, and then we do this. So we know that 4 is always greater than 2, so this means that this is an infinite loop. So this condition will never become false, so our loop will run infinitely. Now every single programmer at some point in their lives will create an infinite loop. Don't worry about that. When you create an infinite loop, you just need to quit the program and restart it and try to prevent this happening in the future. Now let's say we have a loop like this. So while 4 is greater than 2, we are printing out 1 to the console. If I run this, you will see that it's going to run infinitely. So all you have to do in this case, you just need to close the program and stop this over here. So in this case, we can just click Ctrl C to interrupt this program running infinitely. Now very often I find that it's really helpful when you don't know why you are getting an infinite loop to simply just print out this condition to the console over here inside loop. So if I just print out 4 greater than 2, then put the statement over here and run our code, you will see that every time it's printing out true to the console. So this means that our condition will never become false, so this will run infinitely over here. So by printing out condition inside loop, you can figure out why you are getting infinite loop over here. Now from here you can easily see that it never becomes false. Now in the next lesson, I've got more exercise coming up for you which are related to while loop. So by doing these real life exercises, you'll understand while loop very well. So see you in the next lecture.